to C is for Columbia, episode 4, I believe it is. We have taken a bit of a hiatus, but we are back on now, and we are going to have a great show for you today. Sam, what do you got for us?
Well, a lot's gone on since the last time we talked. Obviously, the main thing we talked about, not even last week, but a few weeks ago, was the 2020 midterm elections, which I think had a lot of surprises. You know, we went into this election thinking that it was going to be a red wave, that the Republicans
I believe
were
you
going...
mean 2022.
Yeah, 2022 midterm elections, excuse me, yes. But, yeah, we went in thinking, you know, this was going to be a Republican red wave. It seemed like maybe Dr. Oz would win. It would seem like, Carrie Lake in Arizona, where I reside, would win. And, you know, the Democrats actually did very well in the Senate. Dr. Oz just ended up losing despite a lot of Fetterman's downfalls, such as his stroke, for instance. I'm actually from Pittsburgh originally, so I followed that election pretty closely. I have to say, John Fetterman is the most Pennsylvania candidate for office I think I've seen in my entire life. He cracks me up, and I was really glad that he pulled that one off. I'm in Arizona currently right now, and what I've been paying attention to, Katie Hobbs managed to barely beat Carrie Lake for the governor election in Arizona, which was an election many people thought Carrie Lake would win. And the bigger story isn't so much just that Carrie Lake lost, but it's her contribution to election denialism. Carrie Lake was already seen as a candidate who was a very big believer, or at least claims to be a believer, in election denialism, as she thinks the 2020 presidential election was not valid and that election should have been overturned. She's now pulling the same tactics as she's lost this governor race. She's denied the election. I think Carrie Lake really thought that the protests regarding her defeat would be similar to what we saw on January 6th back in 2021, and the reality is nobody gives a shit. You know, I live in Arizona. There were a handful of white trash hicks with Confederate flags, because we all know how important Arizona was to the Confederacy, protesting this like a bunch of losers outside of the Capitol, and no one cares. Nobody cares. Nobody cares that Carrie Lake lost. Nobody thinks that the election was illegitimate. I guess Carrie Lake's only step forward from here is maybe being Trump's vice presidential candidate, assuming he's not in jail by that time. That's the only real future I see for Carrie Lake. It's really sad. It's just nobody takes any of this seriously. People in Arizona don't take this seriously. Carrie Lake is someone who said terrible things about John McCain, who's still taken very seriously in Arizona, about as seriously as Barry Goldwater at this point. And, she just contributed to this far-right rhetoric, election denialism, great replacement theory. And, she lost. She lost narrowly, but she still lost, and she wants to deny the results of this election. And the reality of the situation is nobody gives a shit. Everybody thinks it's a joke, and I'd say her political career is over.
Well, you said a lot there. Going back to the beginning of what you said, you mentioned that Fetterman seemed like the most Pennsylvania candidate that you've seen in a long time. Could you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, I'd love to. I mean, he's just such, what we call a yinzer. Yinzer is a slang for somebody in Pittsburgh. Instead of y'all in Pittsburgh, we say yins, which is spelled Y-I-N-Z. He is just such a classic, blue-collar type of guy that you would see in Pittsburgh. He just really embodies a lot of what I imagine.
Okay.
As somebody who was born in Pittsburgh and has a lot of family in Pittsburgh and various parts of Pennsylvania. He's just a very old school, kind of tough guy.
Right.
Okay. I was really happy that he won that election. I really think that was great for Pennsylvania.
So he's kind of got the affect of the Pennsylvanian.
He does.
Versus Oz, of course, that Fetterman's campaign poked fun at the fact that Oz was from New Jersey and didn't really have anything Pennsylvania to his name.
Yeah, kind of like how Herschel Walker is resides in Texas,
Herschel Walker.
but runs in Georgia. I mean, that's the
Right.
thing. None of these candidates really believe anything they say. I mean, this is all essentially the great lie. These aren't people with genuine ideologies or people with the genuine, theory of government. I mean, the Republican Party has become, a complete laughingstock. I was going back and watching, the debates between John McCain and Barack Obama, a few nights ago, and it's just the difference is night and day. I think this all really goes back to when, McCain selected Sarah Palin and how that kind of energized, that base of their party that, has ideals that they think are American that are actually quite un-American. Then, obviously that peaked with, Trump in 2015, 2016. It's just remarkable to me, what direction the Republican Party is going. I guess where we kind of go from here, we're getting to the point where I think even some of the more conservative Republicans are realizing that Donald Trump is hurting the party more than he's helping. They don't really see him as useful anymore at this point. Fox News is kind of crowning DeSantis as the new king of the Republican Party, and I think that's rightfully so. I mean, he won a pretty convincing re-election in Florida, which is a very important state for Republicans to win if they want. They have to. I mean, they can't win without Florida at this point. So, I mean, I'm not necessarily a fan of Ron DeSantis, but I do think from like a political standpoint, Ron DeSantis is essentially probably their best chance of winning in 2024. I don't know. I don't want to make this too much about Trump. I don't really like talking about Trump on air and really giving him any airtime, but I do kind of wonder, what that election would look like.
Well, then let's not talk about Trump. Let's actually go back. You mentioned Kari Lake, and this was your state that you currently reside in, Arizona.
Yes.
So you kind of had a front row seat to whatever was going on regarding the apparent election denial. Now, you mentioned she appeared to try to mobilize the same frustration regarding election denial, regarding the mechanics of the electoral process. She was trying to mobilize this, and you said that it seemed to fall flat on its face. She could not mobilize beyond some fringe groups to sort of gain attention on it. Honestly, I didn't even hear about the fact that she was participating in active election denial. I had heard that there's, of course, with her candidacy, there was always some passive level of she's likely to deny the results of the election if she loses. But I wasn't clear on whether or not the fact that she could not mobilize election denial to the point where it could get national coverage, but you did seem to hear about it a lot. So do you think that there was still also some local coverage that was meaningful within her constituency that, although it didn't materialize in anything, could elongate or lengthen the lifespan of all this election denial talk?
I don't know that it'll really increase the lifespan outside of, this small fringe who believes it anyway. I mean, basically what happened was as soon as the election was called for Katie Hobbs, Kari Lake posted on Twitter that, elections know BS when they see it. So right off the bat, she denied the election, and she's still saying that, she won this election and Donald Trump wants to somehow appoint her governor with, all his power from Mar-a-Lago, I guess. I don't really know what Trump's going to do there. But yeah, I mean, I don't really think that this is going to, prolong this election. The election denial, it's not really something that's taken seriously, even among a lot of conservatives. This is a fringe. What happened on January 6th was a fringe group of, American jihad, as I kind of like to call it, basically terrorists that, don't really have liberal democratic values. I don't think that Kari Lake doing this is going to prolong existing election denial
Hmm.
feelings. I think this is just something that, a small fringe on her base believes or pretends like they believe. There were protests in Arizona. They were not very remarkable. They were not really attended by a lot of people.
Okay.
And, I just don't really think that it's going to lead to anything meaningful, honestly. But I mean, it is kind of funny to watch.
Well, yeah, I guess it's funny and it's captivating to a particular sort of mentality with media, which can get you somewhere, but as you said, it doesn't seem to get anywhere practical. All that it might do is allow you to open a release valve to let people who are frustrated with the fact that, okay, they lost, and they're frustrated with that, so how can they rationalize that loss? They can rationalize it in one of a number of ways. One of the ways you can do it is, yes, deny the fact that it was a legitimate loss. There's a lot of coping mechanisms out there, and I guess that's one of them. Is it a good one? I don't really think so, but it is one of the ones that it's one of the moves that you can play. Now you did say that no one's taking it really seriously, though, and as a juxtaposition to that, you mentioned McCain, and you mentioned the fact that as far as politicians or politics goes currently, McCain is taking very seriously. Which, it's funny to me that I do still hear McCain brought up a lot, and he died how many years ago? 2 or 3 years ago? In 2018. So 4 years ago. He died 4 years ago. And he's still brought up as kind of a remnant of the Republican Party prior to 2016 and prior to its moving away from moderation. But the fact that John McCain being taken seriously, I do recall in 2008, he ran, and he did lose, and he lost big time to Obama. I think everyone knows that. So the fact that he's taken seriously, he still lost very miserably. He lost for a lot of reasons. Bush was very unpopular. Going into that election, it was an uphill climb anyway. But he lost on running a campaign which was, would you argue, moderate Republican, a lot more conservative than, let's say, Carrie Lake style politics.
Well, I mean, what I would basically say, there's a lot of things about John McCain's 2008 campaign that I would not call moderate, just based on my views. Now, of course, in Arizona, the point I was trying to make is that in Arizona, he's still considered a hero, and Carrie Lake and Donald Trump have made a point to trash him and then wonder why they lose elections. And Arizona was more so my point. I don't necessarily know how John McCain's viewed on, like, the national level compared to Arizona, at least not on a personal standpoint. I would say, though, that
Gotcha.
John McCain and Mitt Romney were kind of the last two vanilla candidates we saw with the Republican Party in terms of kind of like sensible small government conservatism that for a long time seemed like the unbreakable establishment, and then obviously we know what happened with that. But in Arizona, Carrie Lake said a lot of bad things about John McCain, and I think it alienated a lot of more moderate Republican and independent voters that, grew up with the McCain family and still highly regard him within Arizona.
Oh, so the McCain family is also taken rather to heart in Arizona. Is that right?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. All right, see, these are things I didn't know, not being a resident of Arizona. Going back to Carrie Lake, do you remember what the margins, or approximately what the margins were on her loss? Was it within 0.5%?
It was about 1%, if I remember correctly.
It was about 8%. Okay.
Yeah, I think Carrie Lake, or not Carrie Lake, Katie Hobbs, if I remember correctly, I think she got either 50% or pretty close to 50% of the vote. If it wasn't 50%, it was like 49 point something.
So, of course, then, that's not... would you consider that a slam dunk win? It did take a little while to tabulate the vote.
Yeah.
And to come up with a winner because it was so close, in part, because it was so close. So the fact that it is that close, Do you not think that perhaps this that style of politicking is still the perhaps a viable option, even if it's not necessarily winning the election by any margin? It is coming. It is splitting the vote rather evenly for a number of reasons. It increases divisiveness. It increases hostility. But do you not think that perhaps that's running a traditional conservative campaign? They may just lose way worse than losing by a percentage point in that particular constituency?
Well, I think what also does need to be taken into consideration is that Arizona for a long time has been considered a Republican stronghold. It wasn't really that long ago where this was essentially the Barry Goldwater state. There's a statue of Barry Goldwater in Paradise Valley here in Arizona that I actually went and saw just for the sake of it. I mean, this is a Republican stronghold, and here's the reality of the situation. It went blue in 2020. We have two Democratic senators, one of which was just reelected, and now we have a Democratic governor, a Democratic secretary of state. So, I mean, narrow victories, yes, but you still have to remember these are victories in a state that Republicans have always taken for granted. I remember back in 2020 when I was working on the election, my team became very confident that Biden would win Arizona. And I told my roommate at the time, I had a roommate back then, and he had lived in Arizona for a very long time, and he was like, when was the last time the Democrats won Arizona? I haven't heard anything about this. And kind of ended up being right about that. So it's just from the perspective of people who have lived in Arizona in a very long time, and how the state has always been considered a Republican stronghold. Two Democratic senators, Democratic governor, blue state as of 2020, not to mention some other things. Arizona became one of the states that legalized marijuana back in 2020. And here's the thing, marijuana used to be a felony in Arizona, regardless what amount of marijuana you had in possession. 1 gram would have gotten you a felony in Arizona up until a while ago. So this was a very conservative state. And, you know, the Democrats, they are just kind of chipping away, but they're also winning. And I think that's very meaningful in a state like this.
Gotcha. Okay, and those wins you see as perhaps permanent flipping of the state of Arizona in some regard. I mean, you don't think that, you think that the ground that has been gained will not suddenly be lost, at least.
Well, nothing's permanent in politics, I'll say that much, but I do think this is a sign that the state is changing. This isn't the Arizona of 2000. This isn't the Arizona of 2004. This state is changing. Some ways are good, some ways are bad, but politically it's very good for Democrats. I mean, I would be very happy about this. I mean, you know, the Democrats probably won't win Florida. They didn't win Florida in 2020. They didn't win Ohio in 2020, so they need other states. This isn't the 2004 map anymore. They need states like Arizona and Nevada and New Mexico, maybe Georgia, if they can pull that off again, which I'm kind of skeptical, but, you know, who knows. You go back to the 2004 map, it came down to Ohio and Florida. The map electorally has changed a lot. You know, they've won all of these other states that if they can keep, you know, this would give them a pretty serious advantage, where maybe they don't even really have to campaign in Florida.
Ohio was always the state that, you know, Republicans can't win without Ohio, and can't win without Florida, like you said. And if Democrats stop needing at all Ohio or Florida, they may just not, you're right, not care if they can form a coalition with these other states that have in the past few years moved to more bluer voting patterns. You mentioned Arizona. When's the last time Arizona went blue for the presidency? Do you know off the top of your head when that was? I'm kind of curious.
Absolutely. 1996, Clinton versus Dole.
Okay, so yeah, it had been a long time. I heard you mention the American ideals of the Republican Party. We'll call it the older Republican Party, the more conservative Republican Party. Um, I just don't know whether saying these are the American ideals, American values, that sounds like a bit of a sales pitch to me. I don't know whether that holds any water as far as, that could be an attempt at selling an idea, calling it an American ideal, but it doesn't seem to me that there is one set necessarily of American ideals that will be crystallized in as these are the American ideals and these are the ones we're going to come to. And of course, Republicans or anyone using that sales pitch would like you to think that those are in fact the American ideals. But I think that within the Republican Party, those ideals started to morph and flip into other things, or other parts of those ideals, things that were buried in those ideals came out. And that fact kind of tells me that American ideals as a principled matter within a party, those are really just things to sell your constituents, as far as I'm concerned. That was just one bit I wanted to mention.
So besides the midterms, which I think we've covered pretty extensively, a lot of other things going on right now. The Senate passed a bill to make gay marriage legal on the federal level, so it'll no longer just be up to the Supreme Court. That's something that's pretty interesting, I thought. I think it's really interesting is how the Democratic Party has to kind of protect a lot of these things beyond the Supreme Court, since obviously that's been flipped in a pretty conservative direction. I didn't really have any major points about this, but I mean, it is, really interesting to me as someone who grew up in an era where, I mean, when we were kids, gay marriage was one of those subjects even the Democrats didn't touch. And, there's been a lot of progress on that issue, I'd say.
Right. Yes, the conservative Supreme Court has acted as a backdrop, if you will. It served as a bit of a backdrop for Democrats to argue, well, the Supreme Court is going to overturn this, that, or the other. So what we need to do is get a coalition of Democrats into Congress, into the presidency, to try and protect these things, whatever it might be, abortion, gay rights, all that. And I actually think that could play well to their hand, because the conservative Supreme Court, save a judicial impeachment, is going to be conservative for a little while now. Or I guess if some justice dies or retires, but that doesn't, it appears the makeup is going to be pretty conservative for a little while. And so I do think that the Democrats can use that for their own platform. In a similar way that Republicans used Roe v. Wade as a way to garner reactionary support for, Roe v. Wade is on the books, we gotta protect life and all that, and they can use that as a backdrop to try to garner support on particular issues. And in a similar way, now that the Supreme Court is rather conservative and has been for a few years, I do think Democrats can use that as a solid backdrop for their own platform. Which is odd, because would they prefer to see a more liberal justice or more liberal judiciary? Probably, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they can't use the fact that it is a conservative court to help win elections.
Yeah, absolutely. No, those are all great points. Moving on from that, I think we've covered that adequately. One thing I did want to mention, and I was kind of not sure if I wanted to include this on the podcast originally, but I think we should cover it.
It's Yeezy, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
I don't know what to say, honestly. So he apparently had dinner with Donald Trump and, how do you pronounce his name? Nick
Oh, yes,
Fuentes?
that's right. That's Nick Fuente. I say Fuente.
Okay. Yeah. So I've heard a lot of different things about that dinner. I heard that Trump got really upset and said, "You're gonna lose. I'm gonna beat you." And then he
I didn't hear that, but perhaps.
I heard it on, I believe, like the late night show with Colbert.
Gotcha.
So I
Okay.
think it's valid. Not to make this too much about Trump, but just to cover that aspect of it.
No, absolutely.
I want to be careful what I say here because I don't want to accidentally demonetize us. But like I think,
well, we're not really generating any money
well,
yet.
just
So.
in case we do, because it's hard to
In
kind
case
of
we
talk
do.
about stuff like this.
Well, this is the podcast that is supposed to be just people talking.
I suppose so. Well, okay. Okay, well, let's just say Kanye West praised somebody that probably shouldn't be praised
Oh,
on any
I think we
level.
could say Adolf Hitler.
Can we? Okay.
I think so, yeah.
Okay, so Kanye West praised Adolf Hitler and said that there were things he liked about him. Here's what kind of scares me here. Right now, nobody is really taking Kanye West seriously as a presidential candidate, which, I mean, thank God. Thank God. But, nobody took Donald Trump seriously and he won. So, I mean, should we be a little concerned? Kanye does have a big fan base.
I would say so.
There are a lot of people that do like him. The base of the Republican Party doesn't think Trump's conservative enough in some instances. I mean, what do we make of Kanye? Like, does he have a chance? And if he does have a chance, what should we be doing about this?
I guess regarding Kanye's influence, he has a lot of influence within particular spheres, music, and his musical influence. One in his particular genres, he can make music that does move the industry in a particular way, albeit maybe not as much as say Justin Timberlake. He has much stronger influence as a producer, but Kanye does have influence over the rhetorical musical industry. Whether or not you like him or not, I don't know, but he does have that influence. I don't know if that translates necessarily to political influence. People would have said the same thing, of course, with Donald Trump. His charisma as the Apprentice host doesn't necessarily translate to political influence, and it ended up having some. He had the ability to translate that to political influence, given particular timing and the particular conditions of when he started. Kanye, though, we've just had a midterm election, where it's fair to say a lot of the more extremist rhetoric was kind of punished. There was a little bit of reprieve for extremism. Most of the moderate candidates did better than the ones that would be considered more fringe. And Kanye is using, of course, a lot of this rhetoric to keep himself in a limelight. But I don't necessarily think that translates to a platform. What's Kanye's platform? I can't think of any particular policy reform or views of how he would administrate anything. I can't think of anything that he said. All he's doing is really keeping himself in the limelight. So I hesitate to think that his influence will translate to any meaningful base of support that helps him to, if he tries to run for office, any office, well, he's probably not going to get that much support from the people that just are Kanye stans. He's got to expand that somehow. He can use his influence among the stans to make a loud noise, but that noise, it has to resonate with other people outside of his base. I don't think that simply praising Hitler will translate to that. Personally, that's my personal take on it at the moment. My other issue is that the way that an accelerationist platform can function is that you have to continue to accelerate the rhetoric. You take rhetoric that seems to be outside of the window of what's acceptable, and you continue to push outside that window. And if you stay where you are, it actually dies out because you've pushed to a certain degree, and now you can't accelerate anymore. If you stop accelerating, it's no longer accelerationist. Kanye has now pretty openly praised Hitler on InfoWars, and has openly said that at least the fact that there are more positive things about Hitler than not. I don't know how you can accelerate beyond that. Perhaps I'm just a simple person and I'm not seeing his genius vision, but I don't know how he can continue to accelerate if, you start at Hitler did nothing wrong, for lack of a better phrasing. If you start at that position, you can't accelerate much more than that.
Okay.
That's my take.
I mean, I hate to I almost feel like this will sound like a compliment to Trump, but I think Trump at least had some idea of what it took to run a campaign to a certain extent, and I don't really think Kanye does.
Sure. Or that Kanye cares. I don't even know if he cares.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just at this point it's still very early. I personally, when somebody is espousing this kind of rhetoric, I do take it seriously in the sense that, fascism is something that should be fought. And even if he's just flirting with the idea of running for president, I do think, we should kind of keep that on the radar personally. It's just kind of how I approach these type of situations.
I mean, it's certainly something, it's something to pay attention to. And it's something that'll be brought up in the discussion. Whether or not that translates, whether or not that translates to his, let's say, fascist rhetoric or rhetoric praising Hitler, will that translate to him campaigning on Hitler-esque pro-Hitler things, and what will that accomplish? I mean, who's going to look at that and say, yep, that's for me, the middle-class American, pro-Hitler, that's what I want to be. I just don't see that as something that will even gain a modicum of meaningful support. But again, I could be wrong.
I agree. I mean, I think also, you have to win over independent voters, and I really don't think independent voters would seriously, even before he
there's
said
no
this,
substance behind
would
it.
vote for Kanye. If anything, maybe he runs as a third party and gets 5% of the vote or something, which might hurt Republicans, because the crazier ones will be like, I'm voting for Kanye because Alex Jones told me to. Of course, and maybe that's as far.
Well, and it's hard to say what party he will try to even run for. If he's not serious about it, he might try to run for it as a Democrat, knowing that he's not going to even be taken remotely seriously, but still run as a Democrat just to try to mud smear.
He could disrupt things, I guess.
Yeah, he's going to be a disruptor.
Be a pain in the neck for everyone. It's just at this point it's still kind of early, and a lot of this actually is pretty recent from the time we're recording this. I don't know when it'll be brought live, but at the time of recording this all just happened a couple of days ago for reference, and so pretty recent, which is why I wanted to bring it up. At this point, just not enough is materialized for me to really have a concrete opinion about, how. And when I say take him seriously, I don't mean take him seriously we should vote for him. I mean take him seriously in the sense that he should be considered a threat to democracy. He should be seen as a legitimate threat. He could radicalize people into, anti-Semitic, rhetoric and things of that nature. And
there are people that are going to be prone to that, or prone to people that are already stand for him might be prone to start speaking in rhetorically pro-fascist, pro-Nazi ways simply because it's Kanye.
And I think that on its own is still concerning. Even if this guy has no chance of becoming president, he could radicalize people into being, anti-Semitic or, denial of certain...
In rhetorically speaking, I think so. Anyone that would take an anti-Semitic position materially, and by that I mean an anti-Semitic, someone that would go blow up a Jewish synagogue, is probably not going to do it because Kanye told them to, right? But they might do it because they feel as though the tone has shifted in their favor, and now they feel justified in blowing up a synagogue or doing something ridiculous like that, and something damaging, harmful, and that's an actual like violent act versus just speech, right? And of course, if that does happen, Kanye can easily just say, well, I'm just speaking. I'm just free speech and all that, and I'm actually just pushing the boundaries. I have nothing to do with any of the actions that are consequence to or claim to be consequence of my words. My words are just my words. The other thing with Kanye is that I believe he's lost most of his franchisee or franchise positions. Adidas dropped him, right?
I'm honestly, I don't follow pop culture things well enough to really know.
Well, I bring that up. I just bring that up in order to say that if they have dropped him, they can only drop him so far. Every bank can agree to not loan to him. All of his labels, or all of his, I guess he is his own label, but all of his franchise positions, like his shoes or whatever, his merchandise, they can all drop him. But after that, he's just left on his own. Does he still have the ability to garner media attention on his own? That's another question that I don't know. He's pretty much at this point a pariah.
He is. And I mean, one other point I'll make, Trump at least had the benefit of being able to run as a Republican. I don't think the Republicans are even really going to want Kanye. They want Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley.
Right.
And people such as...
Well, they may, and some of them may want Trump. There's still a large constituency of the Republican Party that is pro-Trump. But none of them at this moment, are pro-Kanye. That's fair.
Kanye wouldn't be able to influence the Republican Party as deeply as Trump.
Not as a party, right? Not as a party. All he has is his. I keep using the word stands. The people that stand for him. There are people that just commit the fact that Kanye is a genius. That will be the claim, and whatever he's saying is entirely ironic, and it is in order to make a point which is not literal to what he's saying. That's basically the defense that you would hear for whatever he's saying. That he is simply speaking, and he is trying to make a point about speech, not about, Hitler or whatever the heck. But again, I don't know if he can continue to accelerate. I don't know, what does he say next? There's not much place to go after you've already, basically claimed to be a Nazi. And I have heard pushback on that, too. I talked to a friend of mine that said, actually, he did not claim to be a Nazi. And have you heard the interview? Have you listened to the interview?
With Alex Jones?
Yeah.
No. That would be too painful.
Okay. Oh, okay. I've listened to parts of it. I didn't ever hear him actually claim, yes, I am a Nazi. He openly praised Hitler, and he openly, he said... Everyone has something to bring to the table, especially Hitler. So he's going to extremes that, are not, obviously not acceptable, but also he's going to extremes that there's not much ground to go to next. What's your next move after that?
Well, here's what I think.
There's not much of one.
Based on that statement he's trying to do. He's trying to name drop the H word kind of tap into those radical groups of people that are somewhat fascist, but he's also kind of saying it in a way where he can go back and say, oh, I never really said this, I said this, and I meant it more like that. But because he used that rhetoric, certain people are going to be turned on by this and be like, hey, wait a minute, he mentioned, Adolf, so this is our guy. Is probably the direction. You know what I mean?
Some will. There are some. Yes, there are some. Is it a meaningful amount of people? I don't know. And is it the right people? I don't know. And by right, I mean people that can campaign and mobilize behind him. It might just be a bunch of fringe, people that believed this stuff anyway, believe the stuff he's literally espousing anyway. So the fact that he's saying it, and a lot of them don't even care about the fact that, Kanye is Kanye. They just kind of like that some celebrity is now saying what they feel is the truth. And I just don't know if that's meaningful for Kanye.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, geez, yeah, that's crazy times we live in.
Yeah, it is pretty wild. It is pretty absurd. And now it has, like you said, it's been a few days. He has to say something else to get more attention now. And what's that something else? It seems like it's actually sort of, people are starting to absorb it, and it's what it is. But he has to continue to push forward, and I don't know how he's gonna do it. We'll see, I guess. Maybe in a few weeks we'll be talking about whatever ludicrous thing he said.
We might get to the point where we're the only news organization really covering the story. Who knows?
Maybe. Everyone else
will be famous. We'll be the first to cover Kanye in a meaningful way.
Yes, absolutely. We'll be the inaugurals.
Oh God, yeah. I don't know if that's how I wouldn't be remembered, but we'll see. We'll give it a chance.
We don't choose how we're remembered.
No.
Yeah, okay, so other than that, what else has been going on?
I mean, in Arizona, not much besides what I mentioned before, I guess.
In the world.
Not really a lot of news from the Democratic Party other than Nancy Pelosi is retiring, which is pretty significant. She's been the standard bearer for a very long time. She had very good fundraising ability, which gave her a lot of power within the Democratic Party. Obviously, this is kind of dated now, but, there was an attempt on her husband's life, which I wonder if that maybe influenced her. I don't really think that's what influenced her to retire. I think she's probably in her 80s and was going to retire at some point. She can't do it she had a good run as far as political careers go, so I mean, she'll be remembered as a legend within the Democratic Party. Don't really know too much at this point. I've heard some names in terms of who might replace her. Have you heard anything about potential replacements?
I have. Unfortunately, the name is escaping me right now. It's a House member. I want to say from Connecticut. His name is escaping me.
I thought New York. I thought it was New York, but maybe we're thinking of two different people.
New York. Oh, maybe it is New York.
It probably would
maybe you're right. But there seems to be it's not too up in the air. It does seem to be this one guy who's, again, his name is escaping me. Let me pull him up right quick.
Yeah, why don't we pull him up so maybe
Hakeem Jeffries.
Hakeem Jeffries may be the person replacing Nancy
New York.
So it is New York.
Yep. So yeah, Hakeem Jeffries seems to be the favorite at the moment. What's your opinion on how much the House Speaker, regarding partisanness? I understand how the House Speaker can influence politics in the House, but is it meaningful to you that Pelosi is being replaced by Hakeem? Will that change the trajectory of the House of Representatives?
Not especially from an ideological standpoint. It would be one thing if, AOC became the Speaker of the House, which would be pretty crazy. It might never happen, honestly, but...
Right, then that's not going to happen for a while. I could see AOC becoming a Pelosi over her career. She's young.
Yeah, that's true. You never know. She's been pretty true to her colors so far.
Yep. I think when AOC looks at Pelosi, she's kind of looking in a mirror, and that bothers her a little bit.
Right.
But that's just silly. That's just me.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately, the House Democratic trajectory will be pretty similar. There's not going to be a meaningful ideological shift from that position of power. And as a result, people like AOC and members of the squad may not get, the committee positions they want. So, yeah, I think it's just going to be kind of new old boss meet the new boss type of situation. I don't know if that's the phrase, but I don't think it's gonna have like that meaningful of an impact personally.
Not a meaningful impact to change the House Democrats'
Not in my
trajectory.
opinion, unless they prove me wrong. But I
Okay,
don't
I
think
would
they
agree.
will. They never do.
Yeah, I would.
The Democratic Party never fails to disappoint.
Is
So
there? I know that of course the Republicans have that slim majority in the House now. Do we know who the speaker's gonna be in January?
oh, good question. Is it not who they had before? I think his name's McCarthy.
I don't know much about him.
He was originally back in 2015 going to be, when John Boehner retired, he was going to be the speaker. And there was a bit of a mutiny, and then they got Paul Ryan to do it, even though he really didn't want to do it.
Oh, is that right? I didn't
Yeah,
know
that was a big deal. It was like a big news story, like, oh, the Republicans can't pick a speaker of the House. Their party's like so dead and in disarray. And then they picked Paul Ryan,
Right,
even though
right.
he was like, please don't make me the Speaker of the House. And then Paul Ryan tried to grow a beard for a little while, and it was really crappy, and he shaved it because
I remember
he can't
that. Yeah.
grow facial hair. And then after a few years of Trump, he was like, I'll just go back to the private sector and spend time with my family. I don't really want to do this anymore.
Yeah, I knew Paul Ryan was not in the political sphere anymore.
He
in
left
the House
after the Democrats took over in 2018.
18, yeah.
He didn't even run for re-election, I don't think. He had
Right.
2 years of Trump, and he was just like, yeah, I don't want
I
to
remember, yes, I
participate
remember
in
seeing
politics ever again. So
Well, and he was a vice presidential nominee.
yeah,
Yeah.
he was a rising star for a while, a young rising
For a
star
while,
in the
yeah.
Republican Party. I don't see him ever running for president personally. I don't think he'd want to, and I don't think he'd really have the popularity.
I don't even think that's on his radar.
So unless he ever runs for House again, he's probably done in politics.
I mean, I always kind of liked him as a personality. I always thought he kind of embodied what might be called common sense. I don't really believe common sense exists. There's no sense that is common amongst all people. But he did embody that spirit, at least. He was never particularly far flung. He whenever he spoke his mind, which kind of sometimes got him in trouble, I guess. But he never went to extremes in order to garner support, which I can appreciate. I had one more thing to discuss. Might include it, might not. Recently, this rail strike that was averted in Congress. The House had put together 2 bills. One was a general agreement between the unions that would alleviate the strike or prevent the strike. And then there was also a sick day package that was included in a different bill. And of course, the sick day package, the Senate voted down, but they did pass the bill to avert the strike, and Biden signed it. I had heard he was getting a lot of flack from the labor supporting left, the Democratic side. I'll say left. It's actually not that left, but the more pro-labor side, that Biden had kind of, this is an example of Biden bowing to pressure and removing himself as a pro-union or taking a non-pro-union stance by passing this without giving them sick days. I also heard some talk that perhaps they would try to illegally strike, or some of them would illegally strike. I don't know if that's going to happen. What do you know about the rail strike?
Yeah, so they're not going to get a lot of things that they want, probably, and that's just kind of how labor politics works in America. It's a shame. This is a country with a long, workers' movement and a long workers' history, and generally speaking, they get the short end of the stick. Yeah, I mean, especially that sick day issue. I mean, come on, like, you can't get sick days. That's completely ridiculous.
It does seem kind of bizarre. They were working under really hard conditions.
Yep.
In many different ways. Their point system was nutty. I would not personally want to work under the conditions as I read them, at least.
The labor movement in the United States has been completely gutted, unfortunately, and we don't really, as a country, value labor unions the way we once did. And yeah, all power to them. I mean, hope that works out. I support them, but they're probably not going to get a lot of the things that they want.
Yeah. Honestly, I was thinking that perhaps Biden could kick the can, so to speak, because this labor strike was threatened as well, I believe, in September, and that never materialized because Biden proposed a temporary deal. And I was thinking that perhaps Biden could do another temporary kick the can move, similar to how the administration continues to kick the can with what is it? Shoot, the loans, student loans. Kicked the can with the student loan deferment. He's continued to kick that can a lot. I was thinking perhaps he could kick the can with the labor strike, but it looks like he had to sign this bill. So that did not materialize. I was wrong.
I wonder if maybe the temporary deal was because the midterms were coming up and he didn't want this to be an issue in the midterms, because they were already looking pretty grim back then. They were. I mean,
they were starting to.
We did kind of cover that. It did go back and forth a lot. That whole midterm process, but it's over now. And I have a Katie Hobbs T-shirt that I wear all the time, and I was pretty happy. Yep.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that about does it for us, I think, today. Thank you for listening to everyone out there listening. We're going to try to publish a lot more. And right now we're publishing on YouTube. We will be publishing on YouTube. This episode will go up on YouTube. Yeah, I really appreciate any support. Please like, comment what you think. Maybe you think we're all just nuts. We're both just terrible people. I don't know. Comment whatever you think. Like, subscribe, and we will see you next time.